What we intend to do now is to tell you a little bit about the original Reminiscence project at the Birmingham Backpacks. Would you like to mute yourselves, please? Somebody's, thank you. A little bit about the original Reminiscence project at the Birmingham Back-to-Backs. Then Anne is going to go on to tell you a little bit about why reminiscence is so important for people who are living with dementia. I will pick up the story then and tell you about what happened when we took this project online back in September of last year. Diane is then going to lead us through a little demonstration so that you can see what sort of things we do with our guests when they come online with us. And for the last 5-10 minutes, we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions. Is that okay for everyone? That's brilliant. Okay, so Claire, can I hand over to you, please? And you can start off telling us a little bit about the original Reminiscence project. Over to Claire.
Hi, my bit is about how did it all start, and of course it mainly started because of the nature of the place itself, because all the little houses show how a lot of people used to live for a very long time, and it's a way of life that features in a lot of people's family histories. And in fact, because we do the tours, we don't have to have signs on the walls, it's possible to walk into those living rooms as if you are in someone's living room. You could think you've just dropped in to see Mrs. Levy, but oh, she's not in the room. Maybe she's gone across to the wash house. And people start to literally go back in time and speak about the things that the places remind them of. You hear things like, I remember that, or two people will turn to each other and say, you remember when we used to visit your mother? And when people are in that mode, they are smiling. They was always taking real pleasure in relating their own history to the history of the place. So it was a short step to think how that might be useful to someone who might be beginning to have difficulty remembering things generally. We started on bonfire night in November 2018. We'd done some liaison with staff at Mental Health Trust, and they suggested a few people that they could bring along to come and meet us. And we all just sat round a table and talked. And we have a picture of what was probably that first session. And there we all are, sitting round the table, chatting. At that first ever one, we just had a basket of objects on a table behind me, mainly objects that we'd picked up that were in all the houses anyway, that we used as prompts to get people talking. Later on, though, we became more inclined to set the scene. And in the second picture we've got of the early days, you'll be able to see that we progressed to an actual tablecloth. We always had, when we invited people in, we would have a vase of flowers on the table. We would have a cake that was made by Roma, and the cups and saucers all ready, and the kettle plugged in somewhere safe where none of the visitors could get near it. We elaborated on our collection of objects. We investigated the cellars, where there were a lot of artefacts that had been donated by members of the public that weren't at that time in use. So we sorted out some of those and arranged them under headings, the headings that suggested themselves to us just by virtue of what they were. So they seemed to suggest themes like childhood, food, make, do and mend, celebrations, sickness and health, and working life. And then later on, we added to that holidays. In the summer, we decided to have a session about going on holiday. And we also collected, as we went, more and more objects to use. That by having different themes every month, it meant people could come more than once and not just always be doing the same thing. We learned very quickly that if someone's affected by dementia, they can't just come in and sit down and start. They need time to orientate themselves to where they are and why, and who are all these other people anyway. So we began to use reception, which meant more setting up and having the right number of chairs before we started. So we began to invite people in and sit with them, introduce everybody to everybody and explain where they were, because quite often the carers themselves hadn't been before, something about the nature of the place and what we were doing. And then soon after that, we learned that you can't just say goodbye to people and see them go when the day happened that the hospital transport didn't arrive on time and someone was standing in the street outside. So after that, we started to reconvene in reception and generally have a bit of a debrief whilst waiting for people's lifts home. So by the end of 2019, we'd got a routine established. We'd meet in reception and then walk gently across the courtyard. People taking in, as they went across, they would notice the tin bath hanging on the wall and the privies and the bicycle leaning against the wall. And by the time they got to the Levy front door, the stage would be set, as it were, and there'd be somebody saying, "Oh, come in, the kettle's just boiled." We'd sit round the table and have the first cup of tea. Now later on, we introduced, as the first cup of tea was being handed round, we introduced having photographs on the table for people to pick up and look at and generally use as an icebreaker while they settled down. And then after a few minutes of that, we would introduce the objects that related to the theme of the day. This was not to tell people what they should be talking about, but simply a suggestion to get the conversation going. And we had to think about how to work with a person that talked a lot, and how to work with a person that didn't want to say much, and how to work with a person that suddenly retrieved a bad memory. After 30 to 40 minutes, people generally were getting weary, they'd had enough. So then we'd have the second cup of tea and follow that up with a little activity. Some of them, like the little tiny bit of rag rugging or the making of greetings cards, were suggested by members of the craft group for us. On the month we talked about going on holiday, we played bingo for a few minutes at the end. And the one before Christmas, we made paper change, which were then hung up in reception as people were waiting to leave. So you'll notice the theme of saying we did this and then we did that and we changed this and we altered that. And that's how it's been through the whole of 2019. I don't think there was a single month when we didn't think, next time we'll do that bit differently. And by January 2020, we thought we were working out how to do it. We had a rota in January 2020 that covered the first 6 months of the year. We knew what the themes were going to be for each month and which 3 or 4 volunteers would be in each time with their different roles. So we had plans for making more use of music during the year. And then we got COVID. So back to you, Jill.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you very much for that, Claire. I'm now going to turn to Anne, and Anne's going to tell us a little bit about why it is important to do reminiscence work with people living with dementia. Hi, Anne, are you ready to take over?
Hi. Yes, thank you, Jill. Well, I think a lot of people will say, oh, people living with dementia, they've lost their memories. Often they haven't lost their memories, they're actually hidden. And the benefit of reminiscence sessions such as ours means that by using photographs, music, and open, non-threatening questions, the memories can be triggered and verbalized. They can talk about them. You've already heard from Claire that how we structured our face-to-face sessions, and it means that our dementia guest is now joined by a second guest from within the Back in Time team. Photographs, as you've heard, often trigger common memories for both of them. So the sessions feel non-threatening. It's like a chat about the old times because there are lots of common experiences. Within the context of the session, our dementia guest is given permission to reminisce. In the busy times that we all live in, sometimes Mum hasn't always been given the time to sort of explore some of those memories about her childhood or what she did when she started work. These sessions say, yes, go ahead, we give them permission to share their stories. We let them be the expert. We know that our guests gain satisfaction from remembering the old money pre-decimal, or the number and the route of the bus that they used to take when they went to work. And they'll tell you in great detail and pride that they remember what bus stop they got on, which is fantastic to listen to. They dictate the flow. It doesn't matter if the chat wanders away from our original theme. The confidence that they get from sessions such as ours, plus the building of their ability and willingness to start a conversation or share a memory, increases. We find that remembering a younger, fitter part of their lives actually helps put their life into context and into chronological order. So they own their lives again. They remember, oh yeah, I did that when I was there, and I did that when I was a teenager, and then I did that when I went to work. Oh yes, I remember those holidays. So it helps put it in chronological order. And we're often joined by family or carers, and we know from feedback afterwards that sometimes the family aren't aware of some of these memories that we're hearing. So the legacy of the session is quite often that the guest living with dementia and their carer has suddenly got something new to talk about that they didn't know before. So it helps build their relationship. Despite the new technology that we now use through Zoom, our sessions are still usually full of laughter and fun. And for our guests and us sometimes, just completing a session on Zoom is an achievement, and they talk about it afterwards with great pride. Feedback from our NHS partners, family and carers of our guests with dementia shows that the impact is often long-lasting. We're told that our guests seem to be re-energised. He got out all the photos after he'd finished, and he went through all of them and he could remember all the names. Or we hear, she was singing that song on and off for the rest of the day. Our guests don't necessarily remember all the details about what they did and what they talked about, but they are aware and keep the way that they felt during the session. And I think that comes across from the feedback we get. So you'll have realised that the way we plan and deliver the project has had to evolve over the last 6 months. We now more closely tailor the theme that we're using and the context of each session to match our guest. And to match their lives and their interests, we choose the music and the photos very carefully. And Jill now is going to talk you through how we've actually done that. Okay, Jill.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, I'm going to pick up the story now from really last year when we decided we'd give it a go and we'd try putting this project online. The first thing we found that some of our guests were not going to be able to cope on Zoom, so we instituted a brief meeting before our sessions just to check that our guests can get online successfully. They can do simple things like adjusting the volume. There's usually a carer or a relative who sits with them to do that, and we found that it is quite successful. At that time, we find out a little bit about their life history, about their interests, so we can do what Anna's described as tailoring the session to their needs. After that tech check, we send them a confirmatory email to say we're offering you a session. And this email, the relative or carer can read to our guests with dementia to keep them in touch with what we're going to do. We move then into the planning stage, where 3 team members get together on Zoom and choose the theme. What are we going to cover? We choose our photographs, our videos and our music, and we start to put a session together. The team actually each person has a different role. The one person is the technical host. That's the job I'm doing today, and that's the person who sets up the Zoom call. They access the photographs and so on. Another person is the social host, and it's their job to handle the online interaction by posing successful questions and so on. And we also have one of our team members to be a team guest who acts as a sort of buddy to our guests with dementia, a sort of role model, so that they know what's expected of them. The structure of the session works a little bit like this. We have that clock photo at the beginning with a bit of upbeat music, get you all in the mood to share your memories. The technical host will check everybody in, make sure they can see and hear. And then we have a video tour of the back-to-backs just to keep that connection with our property. The social host will introduce the theme, and as the photographs come up, they'll start to talk about the photographs and invite contributions from each of our guests. Halfway through the session, we have what we call show and tell. This is when the guests will have brought something significant to show us, a keepsake or a photograph, and they hold that up to the screen and they tell us about it. We instituted this because firstly, it gives our guests with dementia a chance to talk for longer and for us all to sit and listen. And also it helps them to introduce some important aspect of their lives, something we would never have touched on. And we've had an amazing variety of things brought to show us. We had some icing on the top of a cake once, and some wooden bowls that Dad had made. It's been quite amazing what we've seen. We've developed quite a lot of skills as we've gone along. To start off with, we were terribly focused on the IT skills. Well, I mean, me personally, I didn't even know how to host a Zoom call, so it was all a big learning curve for me. But to be honest, the IT skills are not as important as those handling the online interactions, queuing guests in so that guests know when to speak, and those effective questioning techniques, so that, as Claire said earlier on, we allow people the chance to respond in any way they want to about any topic that they want to, really, and we just follow them. A good session is one that's relaxed and there's lots of chat and lots of laughter. And they're quite hard to describe, really. So what we thought we'd do is give you a little demonstration, and we are actually going to use you as our guests. Diane's going to invite some people to act as guests. So I'm going to hand over to Diane now, who is going to introduce our little bit of reminiscence. Over to you, Diane. Oh, Diane, you need to unmute yourself.
You know, I do that all the time. I sound better that way. Okay, sorry about that. I just want to say again, welcome to this special edition of Back in Time. Very happy to see you all here. And Jill's told you a little bit about how we arrange these things. And what we're going to do now for the next 15 minutes or so is that Jill will present some photographs, and I'll ask someone to tell us a little bit about any memories they might have associated with that photograph. But if it happens to take us off in a tangent, that's okay as well. So the first topic that we're going to look at is childhood and growing up. So if Jill, you could show us the first photograph,
right, yeah,
we'll get cracking straight away. Right. Now, I'm going to include Mux and Isabel in this little group today. So stand by, will you, while I just explain a little bit about this photo. It's quite obviously school dinners, and they're quite young children. Now, I have to confess, I haven't got much to say about this because I went home for my lunch all through primary school, and I thought it was a real shame people had to stop in school. But at that time, so many more women were at home during the day, and so lots of us went home to dinner. So if I could ask Mux first, have you got any remembrance of having to stay school dinners, or did you go home? And if you did stay school dinners, what were they like?
I did stay at school dinners. My parents were on benefits, so I was entitled to a free school dinner, and I appreciated having a school dinner. The things are very different now with my own children, but back then I remember, anything went, and a lot of the food was really tasty and yummy, but really bad for you. Chips and beans and pizza was a regular daily occurrence. I promise you, back then I wouldn't have complained. And apple pie with custard was the everyday dessert. But this custard was so thick, you needed something to chisel away at it, but it was still really delicious itself.
Had a
So
slice of custard on it.
yeah, pretty much. And I really appreciated being able to have a hot dinner. Having,
Yeah.
myself and my family's quite a large, loads of siblings, so it was always a challenge coming home in relation to
Right.
food.
Yeah.
But I appreciated having school dinners.
Great. And of course, it did give you an opportunity to stay at school and play with your friends. It was, there weren't any lessons, so you could parade around the playground with teacher holding hands, or you could play with your friends. That's always nice. And Isabel, how about you? Did you have to stay school dinners, or did you go home?
I stayed at school, but I didn't have school dinners. My parents sent me with a packed lunch.
Ah.
It was always cheese sandwiches. And I, as an awkward child, did not want to eat cheese sandwiches and would terrorise the dinner ladies because they would stand over me and say, "Come on, Isabel, eat the sandwiches, eat the sandwiches." And I would just sort of sit there and take one bite every 15 minutes. And I was awful. I was the same at home though. Like my dad used to have to sit with me to eat my dinner, and he would be there hours watching me.
Oh no.
I was awful. And he used to hide food in my socks and stuff like that. Terrible. I was very picky. I'm not anymore. I suppose it was sort of my parents having a firm hand and saying, "No, you have to eat this." And I love a cheese sandwich now. Give me a cheese almonds, and I'm a very happy girl, but not there. So
Yeah.
I don't have particularly fond memories of the food part of school lunch times. I prefer to be out in the playground, dodging footballs and, playing on the skipping rope.
Yeah, yeah. Just like in the back-to-backs in the courtyard.
Just like that. That's what I'm going to do when I finish this meeting. I'm going to get me.
Oh, right.
No.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, yeah, school dinners did have their place. And when I went to school dinners, stayed for school dinners when I was older at secondary school, because it was too far away to go home, it was quite good because we used to have stuff like chocolate concrete, we called it, which was a chocolate flavoured pudding, which was delicious. And also when you got to be in the sixth form, you were in charge of the table and you served the food out to the little ones. So you could always put yourselves out extra roast potatoes, I'm ashamed to say. Depriving the little ones of their roast potatoes, I don't know. Anyway, the next picture I think should be coming up now, please, Jill. Right. They look absolutely spellbound by that thing they're reading. And I have to admit that from my cot, I can remember being in my cot and reading books. Well, I thought I was reading them. I was probably just looking at them or tearing them up or something. But I've always loved books and comics. And the Dandy and the Beano were my favourites. But I think there might be a generational thing here. Isabel, what about you? I bet you were not such an aficionado of the Dandy and the Beano.
No, not so much. As a child, I used to like going to the newsagents with my mum and asking for magazines, but they were always like, it was always about what freak boy came with the magazine.
Yeah.
And I didn't really want to read the magazine. It was always about you know, wear their little plastic rings and horrible tacky things that are not worth it. It was always about the toy. Or I liked a Blue Pizza magazine as well, which was like a big deal when I was young. I used to do these magazines, and they were all like, you get craft bits with them. I loved anything crafty, anything like that. It was all about the toy when I was young.
Yes, I remember that very well. With the bunty, we used to have cardboard dolls with cut out clothes that you'd fold over them. Did you still have those?
I did still have those, but that's reminding me of something. I used to collect an Angelina Ballerina magazine.
Right.
First one came with the Angelina Ballerina doll, and every issue got a different dress. And I loved anything to do with ballet and anything girly like that. And then I used to go and get me one of those every week.
Yeah.
And that was lovely. Like, she'd take me to road dancing on a Saturday, and then she'd give me the Angelina Ballerina magazine, and it was just, you know, best day of the week.
Mux, I'm guessing you weren't collecting Angelina Ballerina dresses with your reading.
How dare you? My Sunday's best is certainly Angelina Ballerina. Now anything goes. He, she's the title these days. Now we lot of us did love magazines and books, and
Yeah.
it was quite expensive. So we had this little trick where we walked from where we lived to the local high street, where the then W.H. Smiths, which no longer exists, had a range of magazines you could pick off the shelf and just look at. So we used to spend ages on a Saturday just standing in W.H. Smiths, being told off by the security guard for for loitering, basically. But that was our recollection. Mainly football magazines and wrestling magazines were big when I was younger, and that's sort of my recollection of that sort of thing.
So it was more about being told, if you're not going to buy that, put it back.
That's it.
Seems very discouraging for a young man who wants to read. Well, thank you, Isabella Mux, for your contributions. At this point, we would normally have the show and tell part of the proceedings, but in the interest of not keeping you too long, I think you know what kind of thing goes on with that. I'm going to move on to other guests so that a few more people get a chance to join in. Now, I don't know, Rhiannon. Hello, Rhiannon. Would you like to join in with us if you unmute yourself? Thank you. And who else shall we have? Peter. Is Peter there? Oh, Peter, yes. I just see your head peeping over your name there. Hello, Peter. Would you like to unmute yourself and join in?
Yep, done.
Hello. Right. Well, the next part of the session is about holidays. And if Jill, if you could put up the next picture, we'll get cracking on that. Oh, that's a very smart caravan, isn't it? This is another thing I've got no experience of. I've never been in a touring caravan. What about you, Rhiannon?
I've got my volunteer Steve is sat next to me as well today. So thank you for having us all on this session today. Looking at caravans, that really gives me a flashback. I've never stayed in a caravan quite like that, but I have stayed in a caravan as a child because we always had a lot of dogs and animals as when I was younger. So we had 4 dogs who had to come with us on holiday. Oh. So we only really could stay in like very old rundown caravans because that's the only place that would allow dogs. So we used to have lots of seaside holidays, and I always remember the smell of the caravan. It had a particular smell. It's full of sand by the end of the holiday, but always lots and lots of fun, lots of time walking the dogs out on the beach, and it was really enjoyable as a young child. I think as an adult, I don't know how my parents managed 2 children and 4 dogs on a holiday in a small caravan, if I'm honest.
I can't imagine all those people in that kind of caravan, certainly, and 4 dogs. That's amazing.
It'd be cozy.
Yeah. But as you say, they're the sorts of holidays you do remember, don't you, from your childhood, because they were so much fun and there's so much freedom to be out with your family and your pets. and not have to worry too much about other people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sorry I missed out on that, really. What about you, Peter? Did you do caravanning or camping or anything of that sort?
I don't remember doing caravanning as a child. I just remember Black Rock and Morty Ho.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think we went regularly. And being a naughty little boy, I got stuck on the rocks occasionally. But we did have a static caravan in Pontryd Fendigide for my own children. And we used to travel over the Welsh mountains, which eventually put a stop to it because number 4 children, number 2 son started vomiting on the mountain trips. But yes, caravans. My driving's so awful that never pulled a caravan myself, and they still terrify me when I see them on the road.
Yeah, know what you mean. Yes. I don't think I could ever drive towing a caravan. I really don't think I could, especially reversing. I'm bad enough reversing a little car, let alone having to turn the wheel the other way to get whatever's on the back to go the direction I want it to go in. Anyway, we won't go there. So, yeah, let's have another picture then, shall we, Jill? Ah, Thompson's Summer Sun. This is a brochure from, is it 1983? It looks like 1983. That's still later than when I first went on my continental holiday, my first package tour with 3 friends when I was 17. I'm amazed I was allowed to go. And we went to Austria and Italy, a 2-centre holiday for 2 weeks, and it cost us £30 each. I bet you would never get that kind of value these days. And we had a wonderful time. Of course, things are quite different now. Do you do these kind of holidays, Peter? Do you like to holiday abroad?
Oh yes, I love travelling, and I'll give a sort of story from my teenage. My father knew Doug Ellis, who Villa. Doug Ellis became rich because he ran a travel company. My father became poorer, but I did get a holiday out of it, and I went down to Fuengirola on the south coast of Spain.
Right.
Where it was a little village. And I stayed in a hotel there for a couple of weeks. My biggest failure I still think about was some German offered me a piece of land for a few marks, I presume it was in those days. And as I was a savvy teenager, I said, oh, no, that will go nowhere. And of course, Fuengirola has developed into one of the big holiday sites nowadays. So I clearly wasn't going to be a businessman.
So you could have been in on the ground floor of the development of that then?
Yeah, that was one of Doug Ellis's skills.
Yeah, okay, that's amazing. And Rhiannon, what about you? Do you like the summer sun holidays?
Yeah, always love a holiday. I think my only experience of a package holiday has been going to Slovenia. I went with a friend, but my friend had a lot of food intolerances. She's vegan, but also is just allergic to lots of things. So the package holiday included food, and she couldn't eat anything. So she took carrots with her. And as we were going through the bit where they scan your bags, the security thought they were knives or guns or some sort of weapon. So we got pulled into a separate room, and it was just some carrots that she'd taken as like emergency snacks. It was ridiculous. But that really slowed up our whole journey. So that's something I very much remember. But I loved all the package holidays. I thought the food was great, so I ate my fill of all of it.
Yeah, perhaps you should have chosen your friends a bit more carefully when it came to travelling abroad.
Maybe you should.
Oh dear. That's, I hope it didn't spoil your holiday anyway. It doesn't sound like it. Right, well, I think it's about time I hand it back to Jill for some more summing up. Is that right? Are we going to have some questions and opportunities to discuss what you've all experienced?
Thank you very much. Yes, that's right, Diane. We have actually finished now.